From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today, I'll be reviewing the movie Death by Temptation, released in 1990. Starring James Bond III, Kadeem Hardison, Bill Nunn, and Cynthia Bond. Directed by James Bond III. The synopsis is, a demon simply called Temptation targets and sets out to destroy a future evangelist, Joel, to acquire his soul. The story was written by James Bond III, who also directed, produced, and stars in this film. In an interview he did with Brandon Myers on the Movie Plot website, he explains that he made the film in hopes of presenting a film to the public that combined two genres that have been typically featured separately, black exploitation and horror. Blackula, released in 1972, being the most memorable exception of note. Now, there isn't much information about the making of this film on many film databases, but I managed to find a video from Troma's YouTube page interviewing the cinematographer for the film, Ernest Dickerson, where he explained that James's desire to make the film led him to find resources in Ernest and many of the actors on the set of Spike Lee's School Days, released in 1988, where they all worked together. James got a very small budget to make the film through Hush Records, owned by Melba Moore's husband. Melba Moore was a famous R&B artist at the time, and she actually makes an appearance in the film as Madame Sonia. The story's pretty good, slow-moving and unfolding using naturalistic dialogue to lead the audience through the events. I really like the story and the dialogue a lot. There's a few pop culture jokes. One in particular has the first bartender in the film being asked if one of his girlfriends could be borrowed out, and he responds, "No, my brother, you gotta get your own." That's actually a tribute or a reference to a commercial popular in the late 1980s where he says the same line. Freddie Jackson, another popular R&B recording artist of the time, signed on to Hush Records, says "rock it for old time's sake," and then a character by the name of Dougie says, "Do you want to dance with me?" Both are the names of popular songs from Freddie. Now let's talk about the title of the film. The title of the film is a play on words. The word death sounding a lot like the word death. So the true title of the film would have been Death by Temptation. In case you didn't know, the word death was a very popular word at the time to describe something as being awesome or incredible. The pacing. At an hour and 35 minutes, it's short and sweet. There could have been more time to actually clarify some of the action happening in the film, but I thought that the editing was pretty tight. The only thing that disrupts the pacing is the revolving flashback scenes that replays a few times too many. The challenge. The challenge is Temptation. She is literally the personification of temptation, demonized for the purpose of the film. The film is a morality tale, but it's not probably one you want to see ever play out. Temptation has set up shop at a bar in Brooklyn, where she feeds off the flesh and collects souls, and the most desirable of all those souls would be the one that is innocent, like the protagonist in the story, Joel. Temptation's first victim is a playboy bartender who is a pretty scandalous character. He coerces one of his girls to get an abortion within like the first few minutes of the movie. And then a few moments later, he sets up a kinky date with a married woman. Another victim of hers is a married man, Norman, who's just, out for a good night of infidelity. There's a funny scene between the two where she requests a list of expensive champagnes, and then he motions to the bartender to say that they don't have any of them, so he doesn't have to spend any money. Temptation is only buying time as she waits for the protagonist to come to the bar, but she has to bait him in. So in order to ensure that he comes to her turf through Joel's schoolmate Kay, she projects Kay's ultimate fantasy, so he's inspired to want to see her again, and of course bring Joel to the bar to meet his new girl. As soon as Kay brings Joel to the bar, things really amp up, and I really loved every minute of it. I really enjoyed this villain. She's always one step ahead of the protagonist, and she's entertaining to watch, even when she's possessing other people. The empathy. Joel is our protagonist here. He has reoccurring dreams about his deceased father, as a woman in black mysteriously shadows Joel. It replays the last days of his father's life and how he dies in a car crash that temptation has caused. One of the things that his father says during his sermon is, "Blessed is the man that endureth temptation." It really summates pretty much the thesis of this story. Joel has been sheltered from the outside world, reared by his grandmother, who has foreseen that he would be an evangelist in the future. He has graduated from ministry school and is actually ready to begin his purpose, but there is some doubt within him. Temptation mentioned somewhere along the story that Joel is the last of his line of religious men. Hence, there's a desperation for him to survive this test. So Joel decides that he wants to try something new, and he leaves his small town and goes to New York and visits Kay. And Kay has agreed to look after him while he's there. Now there's some confusion about who Kay is to Joel. I tried to figure this out so many times, but I'm not sure. They talk about the grandma as being the same to them both. So at first I thought they were cousins. Then later on, Kay refers to Joel as his partner. And then it also turns out that Kay and Joel went to the same ministry school together, but Kay went into acting, which he's moderately successful at. The story's not about Kay, but Kay does take a very strong leadership role in the last third of the movie, as he's starting to piece together that something is wrong with temptation and Joel is falling for her. So this is a really big turning point for Kay, because he teams up with a guy who's at the bar pretty much every night by the name of Dougie. And Dougie has a very sneaky suspicion about temptation. He doesn't know what it is, but he thinks that she's incredibly spooky. But at first you think that Dougie is just a terrible pickup artist, and at the final third of the film, he admits that he is actually an agent of a branch of the government that investigates murder under strange circumstances. It's kind of got like a Men in Black subplot there, and there's this whole cute scene where they're looking up information on a computer, and I just thought that was adorable. The two of them really get to bond, but unfortunately, temptation is much too advanced for them to even try to go up against her. But I do love the fact that they try their very best. Now, the technical aspects. I mentioned the cinematographer before, Ernest Dickerson. He provided a lot of information in his interview about the film that is sorely missing from many movie resources. The film was shot in Brooklyn and used Lawrence Fishburne's house for many of the scenes. Many of their equipment were rented, and many of the talent were favors from friends and recording artists from Hush Records. Ernest said that he collaborated a lot with James Bond III to add elements in the story borrowing from other well-known horror films, as well as test out a few cinematic tricks of his own. While James took care of the actors and the written element, Ernest decided how many of the scenes would look and took on the visual effects. And this is why the film, though a low-budget feature, has incredible visuals to create the spooky appearance of the film, playing with light and shadows. It has a very low-budget Wes Craven feel to it. I especially love the gorgeous billows of smoke, mist, as well as its mingling with color and light. It's not an easy trick to do these things, but this effort really gives the film more depth and density to the feeling of unease as the story unfolds. The best of the effects were the TV monster, inspired by Videodrome, released in 1983. It's yet another element of the film that didn't feel low budget. Ernest was not able to shoot the climax of the film, which had actually been shot by the Trauma team, as Kaufman acted as DP on those shots and tried as much as possible to match Ernest Dickerson's style. The stranger fisheye angles used in the climax scenes exaggerate the style further and really gives you the sense of loss of control. I enjoyed them quite a bit. The soundtrack to this is actually pretty groovy, with lots of R&B songs that harken back to the mid to late 80s by artists like Freddie Jackson and Melba Moore. I didn't mind it in the film because it kind of brought me back to some of those memories of that time, actually. Now the performances. The performances were all good and unique to their roles, and I pretty much enjoyed them a lot, all of them. James Bond III plays the mild-mannered, gentle-spoken character of Joel. For what his character stands for in the film, I felt he did very well. Many reviewers have said that his performance was too whiny. I definitely beg to differ. I feel as if that was the character. It felt pretty natural. James has also been in films like School Days and experienced an illustrious career as a child actor. Kadeem Hardison plays the character Kay in a very naturalistic manner to many of the witty roles that he's played during his career. At the time he shot this movie, he was not very famous as an actor, but a year later he became famous for his role on the TV series A Different World. And even though he's not the star of the movie, the distributors thought it would sell more videos if he was on the cover. Another connective feature in this film to another in his career, Kay becomes a ghoul at the very end of this movie, chauffeuring the new temptation, Dougie. Kadeem plays a ghoul chauffeur in the movie Vampire in Brooklyn, released in 1995. I thought those two coincidences were really interesting. Bill Nunn plays Dougie and was a Spike Lee alum, like most of the other actors in this film, and his performance really brings a lot of fun and levity that was much needed. Samuel L. Jackson excellently portrays a small role as Minister Garth during the early years of his career before he became a household name. His presence in the film really gives it a lot of gravity. Cynthia Bond plays the demon Temptation. giving the character all of the incredible animation it needed to be surreal and supernaturally sinister. I was really captivated by her performance and how intensely dedicated she was to the character. She had some TV roles after this one, but it seems she stopped acting altogether after 1994. However, she became a best-selling author of a book called Ruby in 2014 and was featured in Oprah's book club. And a special note of recognition to Melba Moore playing Madame Sonia very well. I was actually surprised that she was so good and so entertaining. Yes, it is so over the top, but I really got a nice chuckle from her performance. It was indeed like it matched the Temptation character brilliantly. The best part of the film. For me, there were so many amazing scenes. One of them that makes me laugh now, but was kind of shocking the first time I saw it, was the scene where Kay is telling Joel about temptation and how it's spliced in with a scene of her seduction and kind of her attack on a male victim. I mean, Kay is describing her as this sweet and innocent, kind person while she's ironically doing the complete opposite. It's morbidly hilarious. Now the ending is truly where all the fun is in the film. It's a true spectacle of schlock when temptation faces off with Joel. It's over the top and a bit cartoony, but I think that's part of the late 80s horror movie formula that I really enjoy. The low-budget makeup effects for Temptation's beast transformation was not the best, but I thought it was entertainingly funny. I had a great time with this film and the special effects.
Another piece that I really enjoy about the ending is that the movie kind of sets you up to believe that Dougie and Kay could possibly defeat temptation and save their friend. However, Joel has to be the hero in the story, and he has to defeat temptation with his faith. I really like that point that the film makes. It's not by being heroic and trying to out-trick the monster, but by having incredible faith. I love that about the story.
My wish list. The film was a low-budget film, obviously, but there were a lot of great ideas, especially to do with the subject of temptation. I wish that was explored a little bit more outside of the context of religion. I really wish that there was a lot less recycled footage for us to watch, too. I think that's something that many older films did to pad out the time, and also I don't know if they thought that the audience was smart enough to get it the first time. It's kind of something that you have to kind of endure with older films, I notice. And I think that the time could have been better used to develop Joel's character a little bit more. More like dig in deeper. What is his true personality besides being afraid and a fish out of water? And he doesn't know anything about this, topsy-turvy world that we live in because he's been so sheltered. What else is there about his actual substance that we should really know? I think there was a lot given, but I don't know. For some reason, I still wanted to know more about him. I really wanted to love him. And I didn't quite love him. I liked him a lot. And I was rooting for him, but I really wanted to fall in love with the character more. Now, my enjoyment. The film had good reviews when it was released, but it had a hard time with getting a box office draw. I really didn't know about this film until it was on late night TV back early 2000s. And then I absolutely loved it after seeing it for the first time and just got a huge kick out of watching this film. I don't know, it just tickles me. it's got all the stuff I like, you know, to the test of fate, the practical monster makeup transformation. I love that. The low budget bravado. I do love the innovative ways that they were trying to make this film. And I love films that do things in a very big way, even though they don't have the budget for it. I think it's so very inspiring. I was also totally mesmerized by the lead actress's portrayal of her character. I mean, I thought it was very unique, very bold. She didn't hold back. She just went for her character and put her whole self into the role. And I absolutely loved that. I loved every minute of seeing her charisma on screen. And not to mention, this seductive kind of horror theme is actually one of my favorite kind of horror genres. I don't know, it's something kind of interesting, sort of like the vampire and Dracula seductive monster thing. I don't know what it is about it, but I absolutely like this kind of horror. And in closing, this is definitely my favorite trauma film that I've ever seen so far. My rating is a 7.2. That sums up my review. I hoped you liked it. It's Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers. I'm off to my next review.